you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this month's edition of Road to Recovery. Visit their website for more information about the Vandergraaf drum motor designed specifically for heavy industry applications.
Kind of what intrigued me with what you had produced for our August edition, Richard, was about a comment you made about the recession. And I haven't heard a ton of this right now that, the recession is technically over. I'm wondering if you can kind of weigh in on that. I don't think our readers have heard much about this either, but if the recession's over, I think it might be news to a lot of people, and maybe you can explain technically, why is that the case? Why is the recession over, and why is it that now we're essentially in recovery mode?
Sure. So yeah, great question. So these recession dates and timings, they're I'll say governed by a group of professional economists. They're called the National Bureau of Economic Research. So back a few weeks ago, they had announced that the economy had actually entered into recession in February. So now the common textbook definition of a recession is negative real GDP growth spread over 2 quarters. In actuality, the definition is much more nuanced than that. It's much broader, including broad changes in employment level. So with the gains in employment that we saw in May and then again in June, it's very likely that when they look back on this episode, that they will have determined that we exited recession in May. So that hasn't been officially said yet, but I think when they look back on the data, they'll say that we exited a recession in May. So the long way, and as we look at the recession in terms of timing, this will turn out to be one of the shortest and actually one of the most severe recessions that we've seen in U.S. history.
Richard, I don't know if you know offhand, but maybe you do. What was the shortest recession historically, over 100 plus years of the United States? And I wonder too, so this recession, essentially, we're talking 4 months and boom, that was it.
Yeah, good. Off the top of my head, I don't have the answer to that, but I believe back in the 80s or 70s, there was a 6 or 7 month recession, a pretty short one.
Okay, and so we're setting history here in 2020.
Indeed, in a bad way, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now that the recession is technically behind us, it's time to look ahead and see what's coming in the weeks, months, and maybe years to come. And I'm wondering what the shape of that recovery curve might look like. I think if you look historically, there's probably a lot of V-shaped recoveries, but this has been a weird one. It's a short one, obviously. Does that mean that the recovery too is going to be a little bit different than we've normally experienced?
Yeah, great question, and that's really the answer I think everyone wants to know is what will this recession turn out, or what will this recovery turn out to be? When we look back again on the job losses in March and in April, we lost close to 22 million jobs in the United States. We essentially wiped out all the jobs that were created back during the economic expansion that started after the Great Recession up to 2019. So 22 million jobs wiped out. Now, in May and June, we added back 7.5 million jobs. That's certainly a great step forward. But I think in our head, the thought of recovering that remaining 15 million jobs in short order, enough to give us a true V-shaped recovery, that's just not an idea or a theory that we subscribe to. I think what we're in here for is a long and slow recovery. This is, I've heard people describe it as like the Nike swoosh, that there will be an initial kick up and then it'll start to flatten out. Of course, that recovery could be severely upended by the growing number of virus cases in states like Texas and California and Florida and other states, and especially if we start to see a further shuttering of businesses and a more draconian lockdown than we've seen to date. So that could certainly puts at risk the recovery.
Thank you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this month's edition of Road to Recovery. Visit their website for more information about the Vandergraaf drum motor designed specifically for heavy industry applications.